The Washington Capitals have officially been the first team eliminated from the 2024 NHL playoffs, falling in 4 games to the New York Rangers. And while I picked the Rangers to win this series in 6 games, I do have to eat shit for saying I thought that there was a 50% chance that the Caps could actually take this series. I was definitely wrong about that. The Rangers were far and away the better team in this series, but there were 3 big reasons that stuck out to me as to why the Rangers ultimately ended up taking down the Caps in this series. And the first one right off the bat is the fact that the Caps just were completely decimated on the defensive side. They went into the series missing 2 of their top 4 defensemen in Nick Jensen and Rasmus Sandin, and they then proceeded to lose Trevor Van Riemsdyk to injury in Game 3. This meant that the Caps dressed 9 different defensemen in this series, which is tied with the Tampa Bay Lightning for the most defensemen dressed in the first 4 games of their series. This meant that they had guys like Dylan McIlrath, Lucas Johansson, and Vincent Iorio playing big minutes in the playoffs, and those guys combined played 15 games in the regular season for the Caps. It also meant that young players like Alexander Alexiev ballooned in the playoffs from 13 minutes in the regular season to 19 minutes in the playoffs. And it put a lot more burden on guys like John Carlson and Martin Fehervary to eat up a lot more of those minutes, tiring them out. And for a team that was so defensively thin in the regular season, those injuries really compounded in the playoffs. The second major reason that the Capitals lost this series was because of the special teams differential. I said in my playoff preview that New York lived and died by the power play, but apparently they also live on Washington's power play, with 2 shorthanded goals in the series, equaling the number of power play goals the Caps had. The Rangers scored on 37.5% of their power plays in this series, as opposed to the Caps who only scored on 11%, and the Caps, who were one of the more disciplined teams during the regular season, saw their penalties taken per 60 go up in the playoffs. All of that is just a recipe for disaster against the Rangers, and this is where I think it's appropriate to level some criticism at Alex Ovechkin. He was absolutely terrible on the power play, not getting a lot of movement or creating space for himself like he usually does, but I think it's also important that we credit the Rangers because they had guys shadowing him at all times on that power play and were basically daring anybody else on the Capitals to shoot the puck. And shocker of all shocker, the team that had only 2 players eclipse 20 goals on the year and 3 players with over 50 points completely imploded once they had one of those players taken away. Ovi was definitely bad this series, and especially on the power play, but we have to credit the Rangers for executing their plan to take him away to perfection, and criticize the Caps coaching staff for not doing anything to adjust to that new look. And finally, the number one reason that the Washington Capitals lost this series to the New York Rangers was in between the pipes, and that goes both ways. I know a lot of people will scoff at this, but if you look at the numbers, the difference between Shesterkin and Lindgren in this series was just massive. Shesterkin ended the series with a .931 save percentage, second most among playoff goaltenders with multiple starts so far this playoffs, while Lindgren has a save percentage of .864 through 4 games. That's 3rd worst among goaltenders with multiple games played. And it's not like those poor numbers can be attributed to the defense either. Shesterkin had the 4th highest goals saved above expected and goals saved above expected per 60, while Lindgren was 3rd worst in total goals saved above expected and 4th worst in goals saved above expected per 60. Lindgren's play was crucial for the Capitals making the playoffs, and unfortunately he ran out of gas, playing well below the level that he had been throughout the season. And given how many of these games were tight down the stretch, if Lindgren had been an average goaltender, stopping just those 2 extra goals that he allowed he shouldn't have, I think the Caps would have had a chance to steal games 2 or 4, which were very competitive. And while it may seem unfair to pin so much of the blame on the guy who was largely responsible for getting the Caps into the playoffs, ultimately good goaltending or bad goaltending can decide a playoff series, and that is what happened in this case, unfortunately.